It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, February 26th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that loves a good old trouncing against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, that was a slobber knocker.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episode and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are going to get to a conversation kind of wrapping up Four Nations and what it means for the Olympics a little bit later in the show, as well as your mailbag questions. But the Flyers have now had 2 games in a row with 6 goals on the board. Who is this team, Russ?
I mean, this is what happens, though, sometimes. You go through these stretches where they can't find a goal, and then they play teams with some loose defense, and they take advantage. And, yeah, the Penguins, I don't know. I even tweeted at one point I thought they were playing shinny. I don't know what they were doing after a while.
Yeah, I think obviously the Penguins look like a very bad hockey team out there, and that's a huge part.
Except for Sidney Crosby on faceoffs. We'll give him credit. He did kill Noah Cates on faceoffs like we thought.
He did. He really did. But it didn't matter because that line was absolutely dominant all game.
Yep.
And, they got 4 goals between them. And I think that, while that is very, very good, and I love to see that, I also thought, despite that, the offense felt pretty balanced throughout the lineup.
It did. Yeah, it was pretty balanced. I mean, the fourth line got some chances. Peltier got his first point. That was nice. I felt like it was pretty balanced. Michkov was good early. After a while, I didn't notice him in that game, but it didn't matter as much because, they already had a big lead. But, yeah, I think it was good. Everybody kind of got their points. They were feeling good about themselves.
Yeah, 10 Flyers got points in this game, which is pretty remarkable. And I will say with Michkov on that Tippett goal, the last goal the Flyers scored, he made an incredible play.
I forgot about that one. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to give him credit for that one because especially after they had coughed up the puck as a line, they got it back, and it was incredible passing sequence there, especially by Sean Couturier to get it to Owen Tippett backdoor. But it wouldn't have happened without Michkov's effort there.
No, I think at that point I was already making, post-dinner, post-game, midnight snack kind of plans.
Yeah, well, given the score, I can understand why to a large degree. I think that, you look at the effort there amongst all the lines, and I think that's just the kind of thing that we want to see from this Flyers team, right?
Yeah, you got a forecheck. They were pushing the puck the right way. Didn't have too many turnovers that I noticed. I didn't really look at the turnovers tonight because it really didn't matter. There was some sloppiness for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But again, they just, when they had to win a puck battle, they would win the puck battle. Sure, they gave up some glorious chances at the beginning. I mean, Sam Ersson, just about gave up that first goal, and they made a nice clear on it. But, I think in the third they were kind of coasting, and only because they just had piled it on to the point where the Penguins were just like, yeah, we're done.
Right. Now, I will say the Flyers had 14 giveaways in this game, which is not
okay. It was more than I thought.
Yeah, but the problem was that the Pittsburgh Penguins had 20, and
there's no doubt they had a ton.
Yeah, and I think the part of it that made me feel good about the Flyers side of things on that was that they really had some dogged play following up on those mistakes. Like every single time they gave the puck away, they tried to get it back immediately.
Yeah, they tried to make good on it. That's a real good point. I felt like they did too, and they tried to correct those wrongs. No question.
Yeah, I think they did that throughout the game, from start to finish. And I think that is an important thing for this team because we have talked about their lack of ability to play a full 60. And this is 2 games in a row where I really feel like they did. And
except on the power play.
Well, okay, but let's get to that. But I
Yeah.
feel like it 2 games in a row, not only did they have pretty positive second periods, but I think that they really held it together as a team for the complete
They did. Yeah, when it went to 2-1, the Penguins really never got it any closer, so that was good on their part.
Yeah, I never felt like the Pens were going to get back in this one.
No.
I felt like that one goal was pretty lucky on a really strong effort there by the Pens.
Yeah, Tomasino made a great play. He did.
Yeah, like just lifting the puck like that and floating it out. Like that's just kind of a random fluky kind of goal to give up. So I just never thought the Pens were going to be in this game, which is also very confusing and sad at the same time.
It is. You're not used to it.
No, I am not used to it. Making this adjustment has been very difficult for sure. You did mention the power play just now, and I would like to point out that there were only 3 Flyers players that did not see power play time in this game, and that is Eero Zamula, Sean Couturier, and Nick Seeler.
I mean, yeah, nothing was working. I mean, it just wasn't. And again, for as good as it looked last game, you wouldn't even have thought it was the same team on the power play this game. But it didn't matter in this game. But it's still, It just goes to show you how there's still dysfunction on this power play, even when they bring new players in.
Yeah, well, they did have 8 shots on goal on the power play in this
on
game.
3 of them, though, right?
I don't know the distribution off the top of my head, but they had
I think it was 3
scoring.
power plays, though, I think. So it's not a lot of shots, but it's something.
Right. And 6 quality scoring chances on the power play. Honestly, with this power play, I will take that. And
yeah, I get it.
Especially because they had such great success at 5-on-5 and they didn't need it really in this game. I still think they had better puck movement than they had before Kuzmenko joined the team.
Okay. But you know my feeling on that one, so it's like, okay.
Right. But, I think aside from all that, I really think that we saw strong games from both Jamie Drysdale and Cam York. I thought
they were both really good. We don't want to forget Bobby Brink. He had a career night. So that was good
he's
for
part
him.
of the Kate's line, but
I know. But we didn't mention him by name, so I feel like
it's true.
We need to call him out by name because that second goal that he got was just totally deflating for the Penguins. Like
it was in the best way possible.
Yeah.
But I do think Jamie Drysdale looked sharper. I thought he was making good decisions.
He made a really good pass. I put that it was Brink on my Twitter feed and then realized, I screwed it up. Oh, well. But yeah, it was a nice play by him, and he had a pretty good game.
He did, and I thought that he was stepping up offensively in the right moments where we have kind of complained about his game where he stays too far out toward the blue line.
Yeah, I mean, Brad Shaw complained about it. He said they've been talking to him about it, and he just hasn't been doing it.
Right, and I feel like this game he stepped up and he
did
came further in the offensive zone than he has.
Yeah.
And it was very noticeable, and it improved his game tremendously. So
it did.
More of that, please, Jamie Drysdale. And I think that Cam York was also, I think, on top of his game. I thought he was really doing the best puck distribution that I've seen from him in a while.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he defended well. He skated well. He looked good.
Yeah, and that's really good to see. Again, with the specter of Rasmus Ristolainen, again, having a really good game. And
yeah, I mean, that goal was such a weird goal. It took him forever to wind up, and Nedeljkovic was going the wrong way, but a goal's a goal.
A goal's a goal, and we'll take it from Risto, especially because he then prevented a goal in his
But they're showcasing him. We have to acknowledge they're showcasing him by putting him on the power play. Yeah.
As well they should, and it's working. So I'm not going to complain about it one bit.
But there was only 4 scouts in attendance. I think everybody has scouted the Flyers enough where they kind of know what Risto and Lawton are. So far, there's not been a big contingent. Montreal had a big contingent, and the Flyers were in Montreal. They did have a scout there. So
Interesting. So I think that's I love those extra observations from you in the press box, like keeping an eye out for those things because
Yeah.
I think it's important to note. But again, I think, everybody knows who these guys are, but at the
Yes.
same time, having them continue to produce like this
Oh, it
is
definitely
very
helps.
important.
Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
helps. No question about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rasmus Ristolainen not only had a good game last night, but is also one of the guys, Flyers player or not at the time, that could end up on Team Finland for the Olympics next year. We're going to talk about the Four Nations to Olympics pipeline coming up next.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsor job posts. Put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. When you have a new project that requires just the right hire to pull it off, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make you sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need.
On tomorrow's show, we of course will catch up with the latest with the Flyers prior to part two of the home and home against the Pittsburgh Penguins and talk a little bit more about the rebuild. Then we're going to dive into the U.S. national team development program and what their mission is and are they accomplishing it, which I think is a really interesting thing
It
at
is.
this point in their growth. Then we are going to do a draft eligible prospect profile of forward Michael Misa, who is making waves right now. So stay tuned for that. Right now, we are going to talk about kind of the aftermath of Four Nations and what it means for the Olympics next year as it relates to the Flyers players that were participants in Four Nations and maybe weren't and didn't make the cut and could potentially have a role in the Olympics coming up again because of the expanded field and
Right.
all sorts of things. Now, John Tortorella yesterday after practice kind of expanded on his Four Nations thoughts, talking about the players specifically. So, this is a very fortuitous conversation we're having here. He thought that all of them did really well. He talked, I think, at length a little bit about Travis Sanheim and his play. Obviously, he played the most of anyone, so there was
Yes.
the most data there. But and I think, given everything, I think Travis Sanheim did play really well for Team Canada.
Yeah, no question. I didn't have any problem. He wasn't going to have great offensive impact. I mean, I know he had an assist one
Correct.
game, but I kind of knew that. Sidney Crosby was giving him high praise. I mean, that's
Yep.
he's on a good track to make the Olympic team, and he really can't say much more than that. Other than we've seen this development. He's still not a top 10 defenseman in the league necessarily, but he's sort of in that next tier, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And, with Travis Konecny, John Tortorella mentioned multiple times how disappointed he was that Konecny didn't get to play more games.
Yeah.
And he said specifically that he thought Konecny would have matched up better against Team USA than maybe somebody
I mean,
else
we
that was
thought
in
so
the lineup.
too. We
We
agree with,
did.
we said the same thing, but they wanted Seth Jarvis. Like they were forcing Seth Jarvis, who is a good player. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
Konechny's way more experienced. So, but it didn't matter. They won anyhow, right? So
Yeah, Torts wasn't going to name names for sure,
I
but
know, but that's the name. We know it.
that's the name. Exactly, exactly. So I thought that was really good to hear from Tortorella
Yeah,
about those 2, and then, he also talked about Sam Ersson obviously stepping up. Didn't really expect to see him, but that he was,
yeah.
like, really proud of him and that thought he played really well in that one game for Sweden.
No, that's good. I mean, it's rare that John says he's proud of anybody. So if he says it, you gotta lap it up, and that's good.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated that. Now continuing to talk about Sam Ersson and his potential for Team Sweden next year. I think it's really interesting the other part of the conversation Tortorella had yesterday about Sam Ersson because I believe it was Jackie Spiegel from the Inquirer who asked directly about potentially not overplaying Ersson in the stretch run. Maybe it was Charlie O'Connor.
Okay.
Apologies, but it was one of those two for sure. In terms of not playing Erson in the stretch like he did last year. And I think that that indirectly could have an effect on how he is seen by the Swedish Hockey Federation in terms of, what his potential could be to make the team next year in terms of how he performs in this stretch run.
Well, I don't agree with that fully because I think next year is probably more important than what he does in the stretch run this year, honestly. Even though it's a short track to get, they kind of look, they send out their scouts pre-Olympic and kind of look at everything. It matters a little bit. It's not like it doesn't matter, but I think they also understand the team dynamic where, John may overplay him. He's prone to doing that.
Right, and, so Torts did say that he will still be cognizant of the playoff race and how, the whole team is playing and whether he needs Erson to play more than he would like or not, given the circumstances, but I just think in terms of, like, wear and tear, you're right that it's not the most important aspect of Erson's game. I just think it will contribute to the big picture here in terms of, his stamina down the run, because that's what you have to do in a short form tournament like the Olympics is a lot of
Right.
games in a short period. So
Right.
how is he handling that? And that's kind of the little stuff that I think
Yeah.
will be important here
I mean, right
for
now
sure.
he's still number 3. He's just hoping not to be number 4, right? So that's
Right.
I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as our 2 Canadian guys that we talked about, already, I think, he was really, I think, looking forward to the possibility of both of them making the Olympic team, this upcoming year. So, what do you think Sanheim and Konecny have to do to get to that team?
I mean, Sanheim's just do what he's doing because, he plays top pairing on the Flyers, just continue to, make good plays in the offensive zone, skate well, use your body. He does that, he probably will make the team because they like his size and speed. And so that's something where, there's not a plethora of that. They have a fair amount, but not like a ton of that.
Right.
Unfortunately, with Travis Konecny, they have a ton of that. And so he still has to maintain like a top 10 level scoring in the league. And that's a big ask, especially when the team is, doesn't look like a playoff team. They may struggle down the stretch. We don't know. And that's not all on him. And so that's where I think it's much harder for Konechny to make it than for Sanheim now.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, ironically, we're going to talk about the rebuild a little bit tomorrow, but that is going to have an impact on whether Travis Konecny makes Team Canada next year in terms of what's the team around him.
Well,
So
that and how
that will
many,
showcase his skills, right?
yeah, that and how many Tampa Bay Lightning are, is John Cooper going to force on the team? Like
Right.
that
I
affects him
know.
too. I mean, it does.
It really does. I know. Because I was looking at it and, you and I had a conversation offline yesterday, which I want to incorporate into this about men's worlds.
Yeah.
And, I was looking at the Four Nations rosters and how many of them will be in playoff positions so that there will be roster spots available in men's worlds this year,
Right.
and should the Flyers, assuming they don't make the playoffs, participate in men's worlds, and you had a really good point about that, but a lot of lightning there, and they're gonna make the playoffs.
Right. But remember how the worlds are. If they get eliminated first round, they go fly overseas and they go play, right? So
Right.
the Flyers guys need to play. If they get asked, they need to play. I brought up in a hockey news article that Nick Suzuki, who plays for the Canadians, they asked him about not playing. He goes, I'm a competitive guy. I'd like to be on the team. And then when I dug a little deeper, he politely turned down going last year. Well, if he gets invited, you shouldn't politely turn down. Nobody should, because this all factors into whether you make the Olympic team or not. And playing in the World Championships is a precursor to it. And because you're playing against different players, you're put in a situation where you're not on a team that you're used to, the ability factor is different. Even the players from the four nations will be different. And so that you do get judged on that. And it helps them mostly.
Yeah, and it's being a team player, right? Saying,
Right.
I'm going to show up when my country's federation asks me,
Right.
I will show up
Right.
and I will do my best. And that's what they want to see, right?
Yes. And that is. And so in an Olympic year, you should show up.
Yeah. Now, as far as
Provided
the
you're
other
not
guys,
really, really hurt. If you're really, really hurt,
sure.
fine. I
Oh,
mean,
of course.
I get it.
Of course. Now, we don't know if Rasmus Ristolainen will be a Philadelphia Flyer by the time
We
the
don't.
Olympics roll around, but I think chances are pretty high he'd play for Team Finland, assuming he's healthy.
Yeah, he'll be on the team. He would have to have a horrific start to next year or terrible end of this year to not make that team. So I think he'll make it. Who's he, whose fan base is rooting for him then, other than somebody who's Finnish? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that whole aspect of it is kind of wild, but
Yeah.
to be continued as far as that
I mean,
goes.
just as an
Now,
aside, I have a wilder one where, what if Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington both make the team, but let's say Binnington's no longer on the Blues and Hofer's now the starter on the Blues.
oh
Like
my
that could happen.
God, it could. It absolutely could. Now, as far as some other Flyers players and prospects that have potential to make their Olympic teams, of course, the field is much bigger. There are 16 teams involved in Worlds this year,
Yeah, it's a
so
lot.
it is a lot. So they'll at least have some opportunities to play. And I think you look at Rodrigo Abels could play for Latvia, right?
I think he plays. I don't think it's a could. I think he's shown enough this year by playing in the NHL that he'll be on that team.
And then I think, as far as other guys, you mentioned Emil Andre as
Uh-huh.
having a potential to make Team Sweden. I think it's going to be pretty borderline, but I think he could play in Worlds this year for sure.
Yeah, I think he could. I think that would be the start for him. I don't know if he's making the Olympic team. I agree. They have too many guys for the Olympics, but for Worlds, look, Carlson, let's say he's banged up, I can't make it. You get one or two more to make, let's say Victor Hedman, I can't make it. Well, all of a sudden, Emil Andre's name comes up. So I think that's how he can be on that team.
Yeah, I think so too. And then I think beyond that, it gets a little dicey. Heikki Ruohonen
I think
potentially
Ruohonen
could
could
play
be
at
a
Worlds.
guy. Yeah, he's another one where you get two or three guys that bow out, and all of a sudden they're looking for someone with some size. And Ruohonen's got some size. Ruohonen won. He was in the World Juniors. He played really well in the World Juniors. So I think, yeah, he could be a guy, and he's pretty mature. Like I spoke to him at the World Juniors, and I was really impressed with him again. So yeah, he can make that team, but he won't be like a top choice. He's going to have to wait and see if guys don't go.
Right. Right. All right. Well, we'll absolutely keep track of all this as we get closer to the Olympics next year. Up next, your mailbag questions. All right, so there have been a lot of good comments and questions related to the last week. That was the tail end of Four Nations, heading into the return of the Flyers. A lot of Phantoms talk as well. MRK 8521 commented, going back to watching the Flyers is going to be tough after the games over the last 2 weeks. And we talked about that a little bit. And so far, I think, yes, that is true. But we've also, I would say, beyond the Flyers in the NHL, seen some really good games as well. I think they've done a good, at least the game so far. We got an OB hat trick.
Yep.
We got some really exciting hockey. So I think, as far as the return to NHL action as a whole, we've gotten a really good transition.
Yeah, it's going
from Four
good. I mean,
Nations.
aside from weird penalties being called, not being called, there's some real weird stuff. And you have to look at that because now that we're in the stretch drive of the season, all of a sudden the penalties change. I think you and I both know that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that is a huge, huge part of it for sure. Our friend Chris Berry asks, where do you see our goaltending next season? I think we'll be forced to trade one of two goalies or potentially lose two.
Well, I mean, Fedotov has another year, right? I'm pretty sure of that, and Ersson has another
Yeah.
year, and I expect that will be the tandem. I don't think Kolosov will be in the mix. Whether he's still on the team, who knows? I could see him just going back after this year and not coming back too. So if he's not going to play in the AHL, they're not holding him as a third goalie next year. So he's the one that probably has to make the decision. I think Fedotov has enough going that they will at least invite him back into camp and say that he's the backup. And then if something else were to shake loose, maybe they would change their mind. But I don't think they're going to outwardly look for a goalie next year. Are they looking for a goalie now beyond that? Yeah, because both these guys' contracts are up after next year. Everybody was signed to a 2-year deal. So if they were to make some sort of move at the draft where, I'm just going to throw the name John Gibson. He's probably not coming to Philly. But
No.
if they picked up somebody like that has 3 or 4 years left because they want to bridge the gap to, let's say, Zavragan, then that would change things. But I don't know that's happening.
Right. And interestingly, yesterday amongst the comments made, I think there was a very obvious statement by John Tortorella that Danny Briere needs to take care of business when it comes to the goalies right now. I think that the way he phrased what he said was that, Danny was out of town, but he has to talk to Danny about it and Danny has to make a decision. And I there was no question in my mind the message that he was trying to send, that we got to figure this out. But Torts was also very clear that Fedotov was the backup at the moment.
Right.
And that's what he's going with.
Yeah, I think John needs to pipe down. No offense, but I think he does. I think Danny got stuck in a situation where he was probably told one thing, Kolosov did another, and then it became something that was hard to deal with. And I think John knows that. And he just has to kind of deal with it until Danny can make some sort of decision.
And I think he is. I think
no, but he doesn't have to say anything about it. I think he could have left that out.
Yeah.
Danny's already been hit with that. That's one thing where I'm going to be sympathetic because Kolosov was saying the right things and then he still didn't do the right thing. How are you supposed to control that?
Well, that's true. That is 100% true there. John said the Phantoms should run the same system as the Flyers to prepare them for call-ups. It makes no sense.
I agree. We all agree. There's not a person who I speak to. Some people who don't cover the Flyers don't realize that that's the case, but when they see them, they realize that's the case. And when they see the Phantom. So I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. John's not going to be coaching forever. So at some point you do have to have these things match up.
Yeah, and we talked about this with Maddie Campbell. We've talked about this at length, just about, despite the fact that the Phantoms have found some success over the past couple of weeks and they're winning and we give them all the credit in the world. But I think when it comes to the Phantoms this season, and I would say last season as a whole, when they're winning, it's on the players. When they're losing, it's on the coaches.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds off, but given the fact that there's little to no system in place there, that's the only conclusion that I can come to.
No, it is. I mean, perfect example is when Andre goes back down, it takes him a little while to kind of get going not because he doesn't have the talent, because everything's changed.
Right. And we've heard Ian LaPerriere say at length and multiple times they want to play a simple game, but we don't know what that game is.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's fair.
So if you're playing a simple game, then okay, but have a system in place and have designated roles. And what are you doing in different circumstances? How you are determining face-off, defensive zone face-offs and choices and
John
strategy.
doesn't play a simple game. So
no,
what are you doing?
That's a very difficult transition to make. And I think any NHL head coach is going to have a more complex system than what the Phantoms have right now.
Yes.
And so regardless of how long John Tortorella sticks around, it is in the Phantoms players' best interest to have more complexity to their game.
Yeah, no doubt.
On Hunter McDonald, now we did praise him quite a bit on yesterday's show.
He's playing better lately. That's true.
Yeah, deservedly so. We had some comments related to some of our past conversations about him, and it was very interesting, kind of back-to-back comments about him on our feed here that The Hunter McDonald evaluation is another reason I don't trust this organization's talent evaluation versus I see Hunter McDonald as a replacement for Nick Seeler in a couple of years as a third pairing.
Okay, I mean, third pairing, at least you're keeping the hype down, unlike Keith Jones, who hasn't been keeping the hype down. So that's reasonable, and I think it's
Right.
something that is possible. And the thing about the talent evaluation is I think the fans have to separate the hype, like what Keith Jones is doing, and what's actually happening. And because they didn't match up, for most of this season. And that's not on the guy. Like, we don't hold it against the guy. I don't care what Keith Jones says. It doesn't affect how I'm evaluating the player. But I talk to other
Right.
people too, and they know it's third pairing or bust. Yes, he's big. Yes, he skates pretty well. He does, but he still doesn't skate it well enough to be a shutdown guy yet at the NHL. We see how hard that is. Look how long it took Travis Sanheim to be able to play that role and be more offensive at the same time. It's a hard thing to do. You're big, you're tough, that's fine. There's plenty of big and tough guys too. I mean, that doesn't necessarily just give you a job. And then the other part is we talked about discipline. We talked about it with the team, and he's one
Right.
that sometimes has problems with discipline, and you can't take bad penalties or too many of them in the NHL and keep a starting job. Now, it doesn't mean he won't go up and go down and be up for a stretch and down for a stretch, but that's what we have yet to determine. But again, if I was going to believe the hype that I see online sometimes, or we're being told, then why wasn't he picked for the All-Star team?
True. And I think it may be
And they didn't have a
parsing
lot of
words.
All-Stars. Let's point that out. The Phantoms did not have a lot of All-Stars. So
They had one in Ollie
right.
Lixell.
And
But
so they could
I
have
just
picked
want
him if
to
he was worthy.
Right. I just want to point out, I think it may sound like I'm parsing words here, but there's a difference to me between a shutdown defenseman and a stay-at-home defenseman.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think that right now Hunter McDonald is more of a stay-at-home defenseman, and he needs to build up to have the skill to be a shutdown defenseman.
Right.
And that's what will get him to be a third pairing guy in the NHL.
My explanation of that is it's almost impossible to be a stay-at-home defenseman and not be a shutdown guy, because there's just not a lot of them in the NHL anymore anyhow.
Right. That's true. That's true. To find that role in the NHL is much, much harder these
Yeah.
days. All right. The last question on the Flyers Carnival name that we talked about on Monday's show, Paul commented, perhaps some of the reason you don't hear of the wives is years ago it used to be called Flyers Wives Fight for Lives Carnival. Maybe they should bring that back or slightly change the carnival's name. And literally, Paul, that is what we talked about right
Yes.
after we stopped recording about that name. So you are spot on here.
Spot on. And, we were alluding to that, and we agree with that. And I feel like just, put the wives a little bit more out in front with the press pre-event. It would be good too to get the word out and such. So yeah, I think that's all in line.
Yeah, and maybe there's a different name you could put to it to account
sure.
for, girlfriends, partners that
Correct.
aren't when they're not married yet.
Right. They don't
or
have to be
not
married to
getting
want
married,
to do good
Right.
things and help the
Right.
community. Correct.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow to talk rebuild, the U.S. National Team Development Program, and Michael Nisa. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you want your question answered on the show like we did today, let us know on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at @rmiriam. That's RMIRIAN.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on those same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.